Hello and welcome to the Volleycast. I am your host, Joe Trinzi. And on the other line, I didn't think of a creative joke to introduce him with, but it's David Hunt.
It's all right, Joe. It's week 6 of quarantine. Things are a little rough. It's all right.
I spent my brain is numb because I spent all today just charting swings for
Ooh.
like just hours on end. Just doing this huge project where I'm watching every attack and thus every defensive play from the NCAA women's tournament this year and categorizing them and charting them and doing all that. And I've had a bunch of other stuff for the last few days. So I just said today I'm just dedicating, whatever, just getting up at 5:30 and just doing that for hours today. So my brain function, it's
I
come
I
on.
feel you.
It's tenuous
I
at
got you.
best. So it's low today. So
I got you.
yeah. But we were talking a little bit and you had kind of a big initial reaction when you were just watching, kind of tuning into what Dan Fisher was talking about.
Yeah.
We had him as our guest on our premium webinar. I suppose I should do my housekeeping / very brief advertisement. We got these premium webinars coming up. Just a note to anybody, I know it's a little bit of a different place right now. Like some people's budgets are getting frozen and normally they would rely on their school to help pay for some continuing education or just a lot of uncertainty right now. Maybe some coaches are worried about getting furloughed, et cetera. If there is a speaker or topic that you're really interested in seeing or dialoguing with, don't let that be to stop you. We'll figure out a way to kind of make it work financially, whether it's, you can come and be a part of the webinar for free and, we'll pay when your budget gets unfrozen or just whatever like that. Just shoot me an email or actually check out on scoutvb.com. I have a little link about that. I'm really enjoying these conversations. I know coaches are getting a lot out of them. They're getting some really great feedback. We're doing them different than the normal webinar because we're limiting to less people so we can have them really be like a dialogue between these coaches. And it's a rare opportunity because a lot of coaches who don't normally have the time to do as many coaching clinics or be presenters because they be in the thick of their season, they have time right now. So I'm learning a whole lot. I know attendees. So if there's something that you want to be involved in, just shoot me an email, joe.trinzi@gmail.com. Or tweet at me or whatever like that, or just, be a part of it no matter what. We got Nate Go coming up. He's going to be talking about data and analytics and particularly the visualization aspect. So him and I are going to share and workshop with all the attendees, just better ways to share data among the staff and then also to your players, because ultimately any of these stats or any of this data is not really worth it if your players can't communicate in a simple way. So that's what we're doing this Saturday. What is that, the 25th? And then the next one we got coming up, just kind of posted it up. We got Ben Josephson from Trinity Western coming down. That's going to be actually on Sunday, May 3rd. And we're talking about topic relevant to what Dave and I are going to talk about. And that's translating some of the stuff from the men's game to the women's game. So Ben runs a dynamite program, Trinity Western men's, up there. One of, if maybe a case for arguably the strongest collegiate program in North America. When we consider USA and Canada really strong. And he's also been an assistant on the Canadian women's national team. And I've gotten to know him pretty well with my role up there. And his teams are known for really strong serving teams, really good out of the back row attack. And in particular, he's got I really like a lot of his approach to serving because we have this sort of conservative float serving mentality and then this really big, aggressive jump serving mentality where, okay, you miss 30% of your serves, who cares? And he's really got some nice approaches for blending that. Having spin servers who aren't quite as high error, and some technical changes to implement that, lower tosses, still a little different timing on the footwork. And then also how to get float servers to be a little bit more aggressive. And even if they're missing a couple more, but can some float servers be more aggressive? And then he's got some nice techniques for teaching. Some people are calling it a hybrid serve, but really, him and I also would just call it giving servers the option to hit more than one type of serve off the same type of toss. So we're talking all that. So if you're interested in that, tune in. And with that, Dave, what was your takeaway related to men's volleyball that you thought to Dan Fisher?
Yeah, when I listened to Dan, I thought he obviously had some awesome things to say. I've got to cross paths with him a few times, dating all the way back to his time at University of Hawaii as an assistant coach. And the first thing that stood out to me was he kept referencing men's volleyball, right? Yeah, whether it was internationally his time, his experience, coaching there, playing there. But that got me thinking, right? And I think back to the women's Final Four. I think there were 3 head coaches out of the 4 that have strong roots in men's volleyball. Ryan McGuire, who was at Cal Baptist NAIA program before they transitioned. Then you had Hugh McCutcheon, who obviously I think they just re-aired the 2008 gold medal match on NBC Sports or something. And then Kevin Hambley, who played at BYU. And so him and Hugh have those strong connections to Carl. But I started thinking, right, our coaching tree on the men's side is pretty narrow, pretty limited. But you could say that maybe some of the greatest minds in volleyball were a part of that. And I keep thinking, yeah, you're talking about the men's game, but why is there such a strong coaching emphasis, or why are things coming from the men's side? And I think we're starting to see top collegiate women's programs hiring assistants from the men's game, right? And you get some coaches that say, they don't have recruiting experience, this or that. But again, going back to, you probably have Carl McGowan, Doug Beal, Marv Dunphy. Those are probably the 3 guys, maybe you could call them pioneers of coaching in our sport, in terms of what they think about, why they think about the game a certain way. And I think that has a trickle-down effect on everybody in the men's game. And you're seeing Dan's team play very similarly to how almost every men's team plays. And you talked about Ben, his team is undoubtedly the best in North America by far. And whether it's Canada or the US, teams are playing high-level volleyball on the men's side. And I think that's the norm, right? Playing aggressively is the norm, or playing with a let it rip or aggressive mentality is sort of the norm. So, that's sort of a long-winded version of saying, I started to think about why are we seeing progressive thought on the men's side? And I think it's because of those founding fathers.
Yeah, I think just certainly those 3 guys, Doug, Marv, Carl, there's a lot of coaches that have kind of come from there. Obviously, you have such a special relationship with Marv, and just it made me think, we were talking about Doug Beal, Marv's got I still call it his office. Dave, I still think it's definitely still Marv's office.
Well, he's still in it. I haven't moved. So it works out.
Yeah, you're theoretically the head coach of Pepperdine, but it's still Marv's office. And he's got, some of those old pictures, and like Doug from his playing days with his afro, like just fantastic. And somebody also like Jim Coleman, who was involved in that. And just so many like really good influences. And I think part of what I've thought about, because I've had the opportunity to be involved in NCAA women and also NCAA men with a season as an assistant at Pepperdine. And the one thing that I could really felt was, I actually felt like the compressed nature of men's volleyball was an advantage in a lot of ways. The MPSF, it was such like an insular league, and it was just kind of all these guys who knew each other and knew their own strengths and weaknesses, knew their opponent. Have been playing against a lot of the same guys, which is the case a little bit on the women's side too. A lot of the top prep players in women's, they're battling each other at club and all of that. But it's not quite the same. And it just makes me think about like these talent hotspots. You kind of read these books that people write about these talent hotspots, Russian tennis and Dominican baseball. And part of me just wonders if there's something about the physical geography that men's volleyball tends to be compressed into these local hotspots where women's volleyball tends to be a lot more spread out.
Yeah, Joe, that's a great question. I got lots of thoughts on that. I think you have a few things at play, right? International men's volleyball is probably the best volleyball that's being played. I think you got the financial reward. If you win a few years ago, if you won World League, you were getting $1 million. And I think when we were with the women and you won Grand Prix, you got 250,000.
250. Yeah. Finally, it's been evened up. Although we'll see if sponsorship continues to support that. I hope that it does. But for a long time, the men were vastly out earning the women, and it's probably still on the professional side at the top end. They are. Yeah.
So, you have the money is just much greater in the international arena. And then you get the trickle down effect of in men's NCAA volleyball. There's just not that many coaches. So the involvement at the international level is much higher. So those coaches then come back and the ideas or the thought or the exposure to the game at the highest level. And then 4.5 scholarships versus 12, you have a lot of environments where there's a true passion by these athletes to play the game at the highest level. So you're weeding out a lot of the people that may have the mentality of, well, I just play for a scholarship, or it's just something that I do that sort of helps me get my schoolwork done, right? These kids have a genuine passion for the sport. There's coaches, they're being exposed to the game at the highest level, and that's being translated into the college gyms quickly. And then I think the club level has that coaching is being affected by the collegiate gyms. So these kids are being introduced to high level men's volleyball thought, technique, skill at a very early age. And therefore our men's U.S. national team is able to produce high level athletes quickly out of college, where I know a lot of times when we were at the women's team, we were just struggling to find 4 or 5 outside hitters that played all the way around, right? And you would never hear that term in a men's gym. You would never hear 6 rotation outside. Every outside you have is the 6 rotation outside. So all of those things, I think, are leading to the development of athletes being able to play at the highest level sooner on our side. And then you have our current men's national team coaches a collegiate team, right? So our former men's national team coaches a collegiate team. So all of those coaches are then going back into the pipeline of talent and helping their athletes grow. So I think all of those reasons, you see just a very intense coaching circle.
I think that there's some cultural differences too between how coaches who are more rooted in the men's side than the women's side act. And sometimes I say this as a joke, but I think that there's some real truth. I think, so I'll put it like this. The big, hey, what's the difference between coaching, men in college and women? Is it how they practice? Is it their mentality? Do they have to battle to bond and bond to battle? Yeah, okay, maybe a little bit of all that. But I generally think that, maybe you can make some broad differences between how men train and compete and how women do. But I find that there's a lot of individual variability there. And at the individual coaching level, at the end of the day, it's the variability. The individual variability is always going to be greater than whatever sort of like broad characteristic they have. But here's a big difference: the post-game meal. So when when I was breaking on with the men's staff, I started kind of as like the volunteer, I was coming up there from USA a couple of days a week, driving from Anaheim to, and working with the team a little bit, a couple of days a week, just helping out there. It was good, and then when Winder got hired at University of Washington and you needed a full-time coach, okay, talked to me about stepping up full-time, worked out with Karch, it was awesome. Okay, stepped in full-time kind of right at the start of the season. And I remember the first road match that we had played. It was early, maybe it was USC, coming back and still getting to know the guys. And we stopped at In-N-Out on the way back. And, I get my then usual 25-year-old, 26-year-old usual In-N-Out order, which is 4 double doubles.
Yeah.
And, then all of a sudden the guys are like, dude, did you see Trenzy? He ate 4 double doubles. This guy's legit. Somehow
immediate respect amongst the troops after that.
The national team world championship that I had just been a part of, gold medal, that did not carry nearly as much weight, the fact that I could eat 4 double doubles. But I'll say this: that's the post game meal. You show up at In-N-Out, you give the guys their per diem, they eat, okay, and you trust them to eat what they need to eat. And if they make an irresponsible choice, okay, they're going to have to deal with some consequences, whatever like that. When you go to the post-game meal with a women's team, you have the trainer, perhaps you have a full-time nutritionist. Certainly you would have the trainer, the strength coach. First of all, you're never going to In-N-Out with a collegiate Division I Power 5 team. Not a chance you're going to In-N-Out as your post-game meal. The girls may not want In-N-Out, so it could be a preference, but it doesn't. It's a moot point because the staff is not going to allow that. You're going to go to somewhere where there's healthy, quote unquote, healthy options. The girls are not going to be getting white rice. They'll be getting brown rice on their burrito, and make sure that it's actually probably you should go with a burrito bowl instead of a wrap and this and that. And I find it very interesting the way, and you can expand that to all aspects of life and how women's teams are handled by their coaching staff, whether it's questions about what they were doing on Friday or Saturday night that men's teams would not be asked and perhaps would even be subtly applauded for in that dynamic. And I'm not trying to cast a moral judgment on what's right or wrong there. I'm just saying it's different. There's a different level of control that a lot of women's coaches and coaches that have maybe only come from a women's background exert on their team. And I think it's very different than coaches that tend to come from a men's background. I'm not saying there's no men's coaches that coach that way, but I'm drawing a pretty broad comparison. I can think of a coach. I don't want to name them because we're going to feel a little bit mean, but a pair of coaches that I know that were fired, and that's part of the reason why they got fired. They're having their team run at 6 a.m. Well, if you aren't out doing this and you aren't out doing that and you're putting on this weight, blah, blah, blah. And I just think if I would have treated some of the men's guys at Pepperdine, they would have kicked my ass and they would have been able to. Parker Kalmbach could have squashed me like a bug, and I think that there's a level of respect, I think, that coaches tend to deal with guys that they don't always treat with women with. And I think that players perform better with being treated with more respect, and I don't see that Dan Fisher coaches like that. I don't see that Kevin Hambly coaches like that. And, just all down the line. Yeah, and I'm not saying that all coaches who come from a women's background coach like that, but I'm just saying I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I mean, even the stuff that we talked about, the motor learning side, right? Giving athletes choice, right? And how that sticks with them a little bit in terms of the long term.
Not even a question. How many women's collegiate Power 5 teams are allowed to come in the gym and do hitting lines to warm up?
Yeah. And it comes down to just communicating and treating people well, right? And I think that all of those decisions have the best intentions. Like you said, we're all trying to get performance and peak performance out of our athletes, but at the end of the day, when they're outside of our watch, which is most of the time, you have to trust that the athletes are doing the right thing. And maybe that is culturally, maybe it's budgetarily on the men's side. We just don't have the money to cater all those meals.
Can't travel a nutritionist with the men's team. Yeah, I mean, of course. Right. I think that's actually part of the subtle power of the men's college volleyball is it's largely an afterthought. Coaches have more coaching security for the most part. So there's a little bit more, it's not the same vibe. Yeah, and I think that actually some of these things which appear to be a weakness are a strength.
No, I agree with you. And it all boils back to those were all the thoughts of just, as you're gaining, if you're authentically thinking about how you want your team to play the game and you want to see people playing it at the highest level, hands down, Poland is probably the best team. If the Olympics were in a month or two, Poland would be the heavy favorite. They have two of the best outside hitters in the world. Their coach is one of the best thinkers of the game, I think, in terms of what he's doing and systems and tactics. And I think that's the place where new ideas are being formed constantly in terms of here's how teams like you touched on, Brazil and US in 2008, tip to the opposite, keep doing these things. And then all of a sudden a team or a coach starts thinking, well, how are we going to get around that? Right. And I think that's happening at the men's volleyball level at the highest level often, because unfortunately the depth of talent in a lot of countries isn't real deep, but you still have to compete with what you got.
For sure. It's a good thought. I mean, if you want your team to let it rip, I think that you need to give them some freedom to make some mistakes in some aspects of their life, not just volleyball. And I think about on the recruiting end too. So eager to jump on a high school kid if they post the wrong thing on their social media and this and that. And I think that doesn't mean you need to teach them, that you don't teach them. We do need to teach our kids. But I think that there's a little bit of a different way that's being handled, broadly speaking, on the women's side than the men's side. And I think that
I agree. And I think I'd love to hear what Ben has to say about it, because he's done it at the highest level on both sides for Canada. And like I said, he's producing great teams, great talent.
Cool. Yeah, I'm really fired up to talk to him too. Him and I are gonna catch up on Zoom. I've been watching and studying some video of his, and I'm gonna bounce some stuff off in often in preparation for that webinar. And yeah, if anybody is curious about that, you can go on scoutpb.com, go to the shop, check it out, tweet at us at the Volleyballcast, send us an email, and yeah, let us know what you're curious to hear from Ben. Send some questions. Whether if you can't participate in the webinar, shoot me an email and just let me know what you're curious to hear from him. I think that would be really good.
And Joe, last thing I would add is that if anybody's wanting to watch high-level men's volleyball, international men's volleyball, they can shoot me an email. My email is on our Pepperdine website, and there's plenty of footage I think we'd love to share.
Cool. All right. Thanks for listening to the Volleyballcast. Dave, thanks for joining me. Until next time.
Bye-bye. We'll see you.
Take care.